The vicious stepfather brutally took hold of the infant shortly after birth and discarded him into the sewer. In the midst of the filth and darkness, there lay little Albert, who had been named by a homeless man who, through a fortunate turn of events, had been spared certain death. The homeless man had no idea that his act of kindness would have such a profound impact on Albert's life. Don Alfonso, a scavenger who gathers plastic trash for selling, heard muted moans coming from the muddy riverbed on a Friday afternoon. After first thinking it was all in his head, he eventually came to terms with the reality. A defenseless infant lay before him as he examined it more closely. With an incredible display of strength, Don Alfonso rescued himself from the murky waters and carefully transferred the youngster to an old wheelbarrow that he used for his everyday tasks. He hurriedly purchased diapers, milk, and bottles for his newborn son, Albert. Using his minimal earnings from the day, he named him after his late father. Embraced by the weathered sweater of Don Alfonso, Albert embarked on a path characterized by selflessness and empathy. Dona Georgia's humble home provided Albert with a safe haven, but his mother was overcome with sadness when he arrived. She had fallen for an engineer who was working on a construction site close to her home when she was once a wealthy woman. Unexpected pregnancy resulted from their whirlwind passion, but her delight quickly changed to despair when her boyfriend disappeared, purportedly taken to a faraway location. She sought refuge in her parents' arms after being sent out by destiny, but she was instead met with their furious decree. She had to move swiftly to cover up what she thought was an offense. The unrequited admirer and faithful confidant, Alex, proposed a solution: he would wed her and take the child into his own family. Their coupling, which was driven more by duty than joy, continued regardless of her apathetic reaction. The event, which was marked by artificial joy, was an effort to keep up appearances. The girl's parents put on a show for their friends and acquaintances, covering up their inner agony with fake happiness. Even though there was a pretense of excitement at the lavish celebrations, Georgia's tears showed that she was actually rather unhappy. Whispers of uncertainty shook the party, but she pretended her tears were happy tears and tried her best to conceal her inner torment. Alex, enchanted by the idea of a perfect marriage, quickly sought comfort in irresponsible spending, wasting their fortune. Their honeymoon was the turning point in their marriage, when Alex, still reeling from Georgia's rejection, turned to hedonism for comfort. After they returned, living lavishly on her parents' inheritance, Alex refused to work for his keep and instead ordered Georgia's riches to support his extravagant lifestyle. He had complete control over her and could dictate terms to her without fear of repercussions in return for her silence over his supposed misdeeds. As Georgia's pregnancy approached its peak, Alex plotted a spiteful strategy to exact revenge for her rejections. Tragically, he planned the kidnapping of their unborn child so that Georgia would not have the opportunity to give birth in a medical facility. After seducing her with illegal things, he took their children. Georgia woke up to an empty crib, and her agony could not be quieted until she realized they were lost in the midst of a broken household and the sorrow of a kid taken away. Rather than Alex, suspicion was focused on the ominous specter of kidnapping. Georgia and her family, their hearts heavy with sorrow, called the police. Their desperate search for their missing heir fueled by their despair. In a parallel universe, Don Alfonso delighted in the ease of fatherhood and treasured every day he spent taking care of Albert. He developed a relationship with his adopted son via the kindness of strangers and the hardships of a lowly existence, creating a tapestry of love amidst the dirt and muck of their everyday lives. They moved through the busy streets together. Don Alfonso, his heart full of fatherly devotion, worked tirelessly to provide for their few necessities as Albert was cradled in the safety of his improvised cocoon. Don Alfonso persevered in spite of the derision he received from his contemporaries, who made fun of his generosity and said he was wasting his time on someone else's child. After his wife and kids ran off to live with a wealthy suitor, he was left alone in the forest and found comfort in his unwavering determination to gathering recyclables for the recycling center. He withdrew into the peace of nature, eking out a simple life in a remote cabin he constructed himself. His faithful buddy, Albert, grew up surrounded by the sound of their laughing and the rustle of leaves. He grew up learning the value of diligence and tenacity by going on scavenger hunts with his father. Ever the loving caregiver, Don Alfonso made sure Albert had everything he needed, giving him clean clothes and putting his studies first. Albert started attending school when he was 4 years old, and he did well under the direction of committed teachers. Taking on the role of breadwinner when he entered puberty, Albert got a job as a gardener through connections he acquired in school. He helped support his father's work by tending to his classmates' lawns every Saturday, earning a decent pay. Graduation was almost around the corner, and Albert's natural inquisitiveness and love of mechanics had inspired a passion of his to become an auto mechanic. As evidence of his unfaltering belief in Albert's abilities, Don Alfonso shocked him by revealing a concealed stash of savings. It appeared as though Albert's aspirations were within grasp with this fresh financial support. With an abundance of gratitude and great enthusiasm, Albert set out on his business career, opening his own car repair shop. As he approached maturity and prepared to leave his mark, he made a solemn promise to live up to his father's unfaltering devotion by achieving greatness. Albert looked forward to the future with hope and purpose, resolved to fulfill his promise to the man he proudly called father. Since he was determined and had his father's unwavering support, on the eve of his vehicle repair shop's big opening, Albert and his father, Don Alfonso, paused to contemplate. Don Alfonso made a choice that would change their lives irrevocably when the celebrations came to a close and nightfall arrived. Truthfully disclosing to Albert his true roots, he said that they were united not by blood but by love, devoted to repaying his father's unfaltering loyalty with limitless resolve. Albert hugged him in an embrace of gratitude. In the beginning, there weren't many clients and the future looked bleak at the workshop. But Albert's business thrived, growing in both staff and customers, because he was persistent and dedicated. In an effort to relieve his father of some of his responsibilities, Albert begged Don Alfonso to stop working and promised him a life of relaxation and happiness if he did. Desperate for hints about his background, Albert hired a private investigator, driven by an unwavering desire to learn more about his origins. Albert gave up, discouraged that the trail would not warm up despite his best efforts. But destiny had other plans and revealed something surprising. A troubled woman at the workshop was deeply affected by a ragged sheet of paper that the detective brought back with him one fateful morning. She identified herself as Dona Georgia through her terrified admissions, having been stripped of her riches and reduced to poverty by Alex's evil deeds. Strangely enough, her son's birth date coincided with the day Don Alfonso found the abandoned kid. In search of proof, Albert pursued a DNA test, which revealed the unbreakable link between mother and son. Alex's reign of terror came to an unexpected end when he was confronted with his prior transgressions and was imprisoned for 10 years. Finally at peace, Albert welcomed his new family and took care of his mother in addition to his adored father. Their broken lives were put back together by the strength of forgiveness and redemption. And they found comfort and joy in the warmth of their shared love. As the years went by, Don Alfonso felt comfort in the knowledge that his kid would always be encircled by family affection and would never be alone. Together, with hearts full of thankfulness and optimism, they pressed forth, welcoming the promise of future. Let's examine a comparable tale from October 26, 2018. It was a fresh, clear morning, and he looked forward to another Friday. He packed his bag and headed for work, not realizing how his next action would drastically change his tale. The story begins with the three-member White family's decision to spend their vacation in a camper near the peaceful beaches. They had been working non-stop for months, so they decided to take a break in their New Zealand vacation house. They reached the holiday campsite, a favorite among campers in search of solace amidst stunning New Zealand coastal landscapes. In anticipation of what they hoped would be a rejuvenating beach getaway, the Whites eagerly gathered their belongings, said their goodbyes, and were off. Unbeknownst to them, their plans would undergo a surprising transformation. As soon as they arrived, the breathtaking scenery enchanted them. Their little boy splashed around on the sand and ran gleefully toward the shore. Little did they know, the events that were about to transpire would disrupt their peaceful camping site. A local fisherman, who usually casts his lines at Matamata Beach, strayed from his customary routine that fateful morning. In the hopes of catching a large fish, he decided to walk the few hundred meters to Terra and cast his lines. Little did he know that this shift would bring about an unforeseen meeting. Jack, a fisherman, went out to check his lines as soon as the sun came up. Something out of the ordinary, a vaporous item slipping by him, came to his attention at that moment. At first, he thought it was just random trash. But then he saw that it was actually a doll. It turned out to be a real baby. But at first it was believed to be a discarded doll. Jack had rescued it. Everything about it felt like it had come from a nightmare. The terrifying reality of the scenario hit Jack, the fisherman, when he realized the motionless form he had thought was a doll was really a newborn. A little cry from the baby snapped Jack out of her daze and into the harsh reality of the situation. He held the baby in his shaking hands, its fragile face and wet hair a striking contrast to its terrible state. The gravity of the situation forced Jack to act swiftly, and he returned to the encampment in a flash. They rushed to protect the helpless infant by covering him in blankets and contacting the authorities as soon as he told his wife about his terrifying finding. As the morning wore on, Jess White and her husband remained blissfully ignorant, still enveloped in slumber. Jess wasn't scared until approximately 30 past 7 a.m. when Jack's wife Mary showed up to their tent to ask about their infant. She had a sinking sensation when she realized their boy was vanished, abducted by the harsh grip of the sea. Jess's heart raced, panicking when she took in the sobering truth. She let out a primal cry of agony at the mere notion of her child being in jeopardy. She dreaded the worst but held on to hope, desperate to embrace her kid again. Upon their reunion, their son's once vibrant complexion displayed signs of impending disaster. Even though Jack assured them they would be rescued quickly, the effect of the ocean's hold was obvious. Concerns surfaced about how their 18-month-old, who appeared to be sleeping against his typical routine, had found himself in the sea. Jess, who was unwavering in her defense of their attentiveness, pointed to her son's consistent sleeping patterns. The Whites were astonished and relieved at the same time, unable to make sense of the unexpected turn of events. In the midst of the shock, Jess said, "He loves the beach. And I've never seen him have so much fun," with a wistful tone of relief that we never thought he would go to such lengths. Quickly arriving emergency responders, including a volunteer fire team, started giving the child first aid. Jess White and her husband's anxiety subsided as they received reassurance that their son would make a full recovery. The fisherman who had organized the rescue was greatly appreciated by the couple. Jack was unassuming in spite of his courage, blaming the result on pure serendipity. "I wouldn't have noticed it if I hadn't been there or had come a minute later," Jack stressed, emphasizing that it was simply a lucky discovery. He said that the near miss had frightened him and that at first he was unaware it was a youngster. Jack acknowledged the seriousness of the situation and the parents' worries, blaming the boy's safety on a combination of chance and awareness. The father affirmed that their son still enjoys being in the water, but with greater caution, despite the experience having a lasting impact on the family. He hesitated before saying, "I don't think we'll let him out of our sight for a while." The family did not waver in their gratitude for the fisherman, even in the face of speculations that they would face consequences. Jess stressed that although such circumstances are unpredictably occurring, it was still a regrettable event that may happen to anyone. When taking their kids camping, she reminded other parents to put safety first. Jess thought about the role that chance had in their story as she reflected on what happened. Not everyone's tale features a Jack, she pondered, acknowledging the fortunate combination of luck and bravery. She couldn't help but question if Jack's choice of detour was more of a divine intervention or a random occurrence. As the event drew to an end, she issued a grim lesson, urging everyone to remain watchful and secure. After describing the terrifying experience of waking up after a near-death incident to discover one's child missing, Jess concluded with a poignant reflection. After going through this, the Whites realized how precious life is and how many angels watch over us.
After watching the first story above, do you have any thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. Now, let's watch another similar story. Every day, the 7-year-old child ran away from her house, and no one was sure where she ended up. She had not noticed that a man had followed her, lurking behind some boards that barely covered him. He could now hear her laughing and conversing in the adjacent room. She could not tell if the voice answering her was male or female, but that would become clear in a moment. The young girl abruptly stopped talking, and an unsettling silence descended. Celestes' father, Martin, came out of hiding and started to move slowly through the old, tidy house. His slow, inconspicuous footfall squeaked on the wooden floor as he tried not to be seen. Over time, the cause of his daughter's regular misadventures emerged. He moved forward again, cautiously turning the door handle. The sight he beheld next was breathtaking. How had things ended up here? In his daughter's backpack, Martin had found a letter that said, "I'll wait for you where I always do. Keep yourself unfollowed by others." Who was the author of this mysterious letter? It was clearly the penmanship of an adult. Every day at 4 p.m., Celeste's school bus would drop her off in front of their house shortly after Martin got home from work. When the workday was over, he would unwind in his chair. Martin had raised Celeste alone after her mother had died soon after Celeste was born. Every day this routine was followed, although for the last 8 days Martin had spotted Celeste leaving at around 5:30 with a tiny rucksack and coming back an hour later. His curiosity was piqued, but he assumed she was just playing with friends next door because he was tired and had seen the nightly news. Martin saw a pattern quickly. Celeste would always leave at 5:30 and return by 6:30. He found this regularity odd and began to worry that something wasn't right. He questioned if he was indeed aware of his child's location at all times, whether he had let her go out without checking, and whether he knew who she spent her time with. After 8 days, Celeste went as usual, but this time Martin pretended not to care, pretended to be busy, and led Celeste to leave at 5 p.m. with her little knapsack. A little further down the road, the girl went past her friend's house and into a lonely area. A long vacant house was her destination after she had walked for over 10 minutes. The sight of his daughter approaching this dilapidated and nearly terrifying house shocked Martin. Martin found himself increasingly perplexed and anxious, making it harder for him to comprehend what was happening. Before Celeste knocked on the door, she looked back to make sure no one was following her. Despite briefly worrying that someone had seen him from his hiding location on the floor, Martin was able to evade detection. Celeste vanished from sight as the ancient, dilapidated house's door squeaked open. Martin bolted for the room that had been the house's kitchen. Surprisingly, the inside seemed neat and tidy, as if someone were still residing there. Martin couldn't understand because he thought the house had been deserted for a long time. Concern and curiosity about his daughter's whereabouts and activities at the mysterious residence caused his heart to race. The puzzle was about to be solved. Martin hid for some time, listening to his daughter talking to an unidentified individual. He then waited for her to leave before going to the room where he had heard the sounds. As the door creaked open, he carefully twisted the handle and was astounded by what he saw. An old woman with a white shawl covering her head was sitting in a rocking rocker in front of him. She was definitely expecting the small child, not Martin. When she looked up in surprise, the two exchanged stunned looks for a little moment. "My little girl has been running away from home for the past week, and I didn't know where she was going until now," Martin added, his voice stern. "Give me an explanation of your identity and your actions with my daughter right away." When the elderly grandmother saw Martin's harsh demand, she started to cry. She took a time to gather herself before telling Martin a narrative he could never have predicted. The elderly woman was neglected by her children, who didn't often visit her in a nursing home. She had turned to the small child as a ray of hope in her otherwise hopeless existence due to the harassment she had received from the personnel as well as the intense loneliness and sadness she was feeling. The elderly woman gave an explanation, saying that she had made the decision to leave the assisted living facility with the few priceless items she owned, a tiny rabbit and her devoted cat. She spent several days living outside until one afternoon. Celeste observed the elderly woman and offered her the rest of her lunch as she rode her bicycle home from school. Celeste also proposed that she spend some time at the nearby old, abandoned house after showing it to her every afternoon. The young girl would smuggle food into her tiny backpack from the pantry and carry it to the elderly mother and her two friends. As Martin heard the elderly woman's heartbreaking story and his daughter's acts of love and compassion, he broke down in tears. The elderly woman was told to move in with them, given the reassurance that she needed not worry, and promised to be treated like family for the remainder of her life. After watching the stories above, do you have any thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comment section. If you enjoyed our video, please like, subscribe, and share our channel. That's all about today's stories. See you next time.